Mark Pascal is a designer who specialises in lighting and ceramics, working from his industrial studio in Thornbury. He began his practice in 1994 and has achieved a measure of longevity with his distinctive and unique design. His pieces are vibrant, dynamic, joyous and considered. To me, he designs for form and function, but also considers the experience of his pieces in their environment as critical to each finished work. Mark, thank you so much for talking with us today and for your time to speak about your work. How did you first begin making sculpture?
Well, I started out painting. I knew I was creative and I knew I was looking for a creative outlet. And at the time, painting was what I did at school. That was how I sort of channeled my creative energies. And I tried to get into a few different art schools and finally got into the VCA where I did painting. I really came to the realisation that I just didn't really have a two-dimensional thing to say as far as painting was concerned. And then I did a little TAFE course, a little furniture one on a Monday night, and I made my first chair. And I found that was far more satisfying because I was working in 3 dimensions. And to me, it was more direct, and I felt that I really loved working with wood. And eventually, I saw these guys that were doing product design or industrial design at RMIT. And they were using glass and wood and laser cutting and water jet cutting, and I thought, wow, that's fantastic. So I did industrial design at RMIT, and then luckily I got an Australia Council grant and also got a work at Chevello Office Furniture Company, which was a very interesting experience to work with a big company, see how they do it. But after getting a little bit claustrophobic, I got out of there and set up my own studio and eventually got other people to come in and share, and developed my first range of products.
Have you always made functional sculpture?
Function is most important. There's no point in making objects that are difficult to use or that don't do what they're supposed to do. And it really must, if it's a chair, it's got to be comfortable and practical. If it's a light, then it's got to give light, not too difficult to service. So I try to think of all of those things. This vase here, the Vovo, the idea is that the flowers are going to go off in a big V. So if this was down the middle of the table, we can still communicate without a big bunch of flowers on the way. So that was kind of a corny idea to begin with, but it's a very dynamic piece because it really shoots the flowers off in all directions.
What's your favourite aspect of the design process?
I just love shape, working with my hands to create the shapes. I find it's a very essential thing, and I really try and make every surface kind of vibrate in harmony with all the other parts of that surface, that object. So I won't stop until I feel it's just right. And I think that's really important, because if you stop before it's just right, it's never going to quite hit the nail on the head. So really I'm trying to do that with every piece.
How does a new design begin?
I guess it begins as a kind of an inkling in your brain, something you'd like to do or express. It might be the effect you want to create, and in my lights, the yo-yo light, it was kind of the effect I wanted to create, some sort of kinetic element suspended on wires. But in my latest light, it's the actual, starting with the actual globe. I wanted to use an LED globe, which actually has 2 functions. It has practical warm white to see by, and then it has RGB colour changing, so you can switch between the 2. So it could be a decorative light or a functional light. So that's unusual that I begin at the globe, but it's a very logical spot to start with when you're designing a light.
How long does it take you to develop a new design?
Generally it takes quite a few months, because the design will be in your head and you'll draw it on paper and you'll look at it and you'll think about it and you'll scratch away how things might go together, and then you'll look at it again and decide it's not how it should be. So you stretch the thing out and you'll go off on another tack, and eventually you'll feel it's good enough to actually start making something in reality, and I might make a rough mock-up, and then if that's working, then I'll make a more refined, and then make the actual piece. And it might be cast, make a mould, or it might be manipulating the plastic in a certain way to create the end effect.
What are some of the inspirations and starting points then for a new design?
It's interesting starting points, inspirations. With the yo-yo, there was 2 inspirations. One was autumn leaves about to drop off a tree. So just that moment before they all fall down. So they're moving, and so there was a kinetic movement, or butterflies all fluttering around. But it's interesting because that light was the first in a series of 4 lights which culminated in the orchid light. So in a sense, the inspiration for the evolving of these 4 lights, first it was the yoyo, then there was one called acacia, which is white, and then there was one called explof, which is like little discs of colour, like exploded, or all suspended on wires, but like exploded like a big bang caught in a moment of time, like a poof. That finally came the orchid light, which was kind of the culmination of all of those lights, because it was far more ambitious and sophisticated and complex. And the orchid light, the inspiration was also in manipulating the dyeing of the plastic and giving the plastic new memory by being in the boiling water around aluminium tubes. The flower shapes actually got a new memory, a permanent memory, and the little tendrils might be curly. And so each flower is different, each coloured flower is different. And so that in itself, the actual making of each flower and making each light is inspiring, because I'm pushing my own boundaries, and I've got a path, and working with colour and light is most exciting.
Mark, thank you so much for your time. It's just wonderful to speak with you and learn more about your work. Continued success.
Thank you very much.